Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Franklin West Reconstruction Open House.
Hi, thank you. My name is Katie White. I'm a transportation planner with Minneapolis Public Works. I'm so happy that everyone decided to come out tonight on this beautiful evening to join us for an online open house. I'm joined here today by Adam Hayo and some other staff who will introduce in just a little bit. I want to thank everybody for the patience in getting logged in today. I recognize that there were some changes made to our project website and the link that brought you to this meeting today. So thank you for your patience. Looking forward to having a good conversation today about the future for these three blocks. So today's agenda will provide a brief project background. We are going to spend some time talking about the feedback that we received since December when our draft design for the street was shown to the public. We'll talk about a description of the proposed components of this design, and then we'll have a brief question and answer period. Again, my name is Katie White. I'm a transportation planner in Public Works. I operate in a division that looks at long-range planning and policy and capital investments. I'm also joined today by Adam Hayo, who is our project engineer. I wonder, Adam, if you could unmute for a second and introduce your voice to the group today.
Yes, Katie. Yep, my name is Adam Hayo. I work in our Public Works department, specifically in our transportation engineering design division, kind of assisting Katie in the preliminary layout stage. But once we get into final design, I'll be the project engineer assigned to the project.
Thanks, Adam. Kelsey, if you could introduce yourself. Kelsey will be moderating today's question and answer period and is helping with some behind the scenes work as well.
Hi, everyone. Kelsey here. I'm a transportation planner with transportation planning and programming within Public Works.
Thanks so much. Also helping us today is Matthew Deardahl. Matthew is our bicycle and pedestrian coordinator here at the city in Public Works. Matthew, unfortunately, is experiencing some microphone issues today, and so he's going to be helping mostly behind the scenes, but I appreciate him and Kelsey volunteering to be here today to help in this after hours presentation. In the past, when we've had these conversations about projects like this, sometimes we do have specific questions that really Matthew's best suited to answer. So if we get one of those questions in, maybe he can convey an answer even without the use of his microphone today, but I'm really glad he's here and that Kelsey is moderating for us today. I do want to put a note up front about communication and changing times. Obviously, I would much rather have this conversation with everyone today in person instead of online. It's a convenient format in some ways, but it's also very inconvenient. It can be harder to have a real conversation about the questions that people have and our responses to them. Given the COVID-19 pandemic right now, all our project communications is virtual or over the phone. We've sent postcards, but otherwise trying to get out our materials through community partners in the digital realm. So we are having these virtual neighborhood meetings and open houses, and that is just a reality of the constraint of time that we are living in right now. So thank you for your patience with these things that come with technology glitches and URL changes and everything else. And I hope that we can find a meaningful way to connect, if it's not in this format, in another format. I also want to acknowledge that the city of Minneapolis has declared racism as a public health crisis. Racism in all its forms causes persistent discrimination and disparate outcomes in many areas of life, including housing, education, health, employment, public safety, and criminal justice. And that's also true in how we make our capital investments. And so as we work through this project and other capital investments across the city, this is something that we take very seriously, and we're looking for any additional information from our project partners that can help us address this in our improvements. I'll go through a few meeting logistics. I think now, 51 weeks into the pandemic, most of us have developed a familiarity with the digital tools available at our disposal. But I want to let you know that after our brief presentation that I have, we have some time set aside for a Q&A. We'll see if we can wrap up around 8 o'clock. If there are a few straggler questions, we might go a little past 8 o'clock to answer as many as possible. However, any questions that we can't answer tonight, we will transcribe, write down the question, write down our response, and then post that document on the project website. The last 2 open houses, we haven't needed to do that because we've been able to get through all of the questions in this time. But I want to let you know that that's something, if you don't have your question answered today, an answer will be made available, or of course you can give me a call and my phone number is on a subsequent slide. But there is a Q&A text box as part of this Microsoft Teams feature, and so you can put your questions there. Kelsey and Matthew are working behind the scenes to relay those questions to myself and Adam, and the intent is to get through as many as possible. We ask at this time that you only ask questions related to this project. I know there's a lot happening in the neighborhood. We can talk about how various projects or proposed projects intersect, but if you're asking about another project specifically, I might not be able to get you a good answer, and I'll have to refer you to someone else. So on the web version for Microsoft Teams, there's an Ask a Question button. Your question won't be published. You won't be able to see your question once you've asked it, I'm pretty sure. It might feel like it's just sort of gone into a bunch of nothingness, but I assure you that Matthew and Kelsey are seeing it on their end, and they will work to get it answered. If you're on the mobile version, there's a Q&A section on the upper side of the screen as well. I believe at the last open house, we also had a call-in, and I don't see anyone right now doing a call-in over the phone, but we'll make accommodations for folks if they do call in instead of joining on the internet. So on to the project itself. Why are we constructing these 3 blocks of Franklin Avenue from Hennepin to Lyndale? This is an opportunity to reimagine our right-of-way because this street is just about 60 years old and needs to be rebuilt now. The street, we have this pavement condition index that we use that tells us the quality of the street right now. It's deteriorating pretty quickly, and it's reaching sort of this tipping point where if we don't do something soon, the cost to maintain it with potholes and other short-term fixes is going to escalate pretty quickly, and at that point it becomes much more cost effective just to replace the entire street instead of continuing to repair potholes. And while we're in there, people are using this stretch of Franklin differently today than they were when the street was first built, and so it's our opportunity to think of something new rather than what we have out there today. So what does it mean to reconstruct? We look at replacing all pavement, and this means asphalt and concrete, so that includes the street surface, the curb, the gutter, sidewalks. While we're in there, we should be making utility improvements to reduce the number of opportunities we have to cut into the surface and make changes. While we're there, we look at making streetscape improvements and we refresh the signage and striping. Here we are in the schedule. We are concluding the part that we call concept design, where we, during this process for most of 2020 and concluding right about now, we ask the questions of what do you want to see on the surface of the street when it's complete. You should have a general idea within the next several weeks what the street will look like at the end of construction. That's sort of the milestone where we're at right now. For the rest of 2021, Adam takes over and does detailed engineering, and that includes all the stuff that you don't necessarily see. It's important work that needs to be done for grading, the dirt underneath the surface, the water, the sewer underneath the surface. All those details get hashed out in 2021 for this project, and that allows us to start construction in 2022. We anticipate that this project will take a construction season. So we're in Minnesota. Construction season is roughly April to November. We won't know more specifics about when construction will start in the spring until pretty late in Q1. Some of it's weather dependent and snowfall and when the temperatures get warm enough for the ground to thaw and everything. So we won't know a start date until probably early 2022. And at that point, Adam will be the best point of contact to talk about construction impacts. So what are the project goals? We would look to improve the pedestrian experience, provide an all ages and abilities bicycle facility along and across Franklin, support existing and future development along the corridor. Of course, there's a lot of proposed buildings and redevelopment. for this stretch, even though it is quite small, and incorporate green infrastructure to collect and treat stormwater runoff. As part of this work, of course, we also incorporate existing city policies and priorities from our staff and elected leadership. So that being said, it's those priorities at the staff and elected leadership level that give us this December 2nd draft from last year. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time describing this because so much of this December 2nd draft ends up being reflected in today's version. And I want to take some time to talk to this group about how we came up with this draft and what the reactions were to it when we did public engagement in December and January this past winter. So this image that you're seeing below is from December 2nd, and it includes the following features. We put a median at Bryant. Of course, the median exists today, but this would be a full closure median with the ability for bicycles and pedestrians to travel north and south of Bryant, but cars will not be able to take left turns onto Bryant or travel straight north-south through Bryant. So that was something that was new. Right now there's next to no boulevard at all on the corridor. And here we've added up to 8 or 10 feet or so of boulevard space in certain block segments to collect stormwater runoff as well and provide trees and other streetscaping that provides a more pleasant environment. We are also looking, and I'll go into a little bit more detail later, about the green stormwater infrastructure. That's the GSI there to help treat water runoff. Sidewalks, it's city policy now that all sidewalks must be at least 6 feet wide, and so that is a minimum of what you see reflected on this December 2nd draft. We also talked about adding a potential tactile strip, which is a 1 foot visual and physical, mostly flat barrier to separate bicycle and pedestrian movements there, so that pedestrians using mobility aids don't end up in the bicycle lane by accident. We're also talking about making transit investments and improvements to the shelters, primarily at the Hennepin Avenue intersection there, where right now there is a shared shelter with the buses traveling on Hennepin Avenue and providing a separate shelter for users of the Route 2 on the south side of Franklin at Hennepin. And we also talked about in December having 5 parking spots. These are, if my mouse is visible here, 3 parking spots here along this white line. And this is a bay area where the cars would pull a bit out of traffic. Right now, the cars, if you're getting out of your car, you're coming right up on the traffic that's driving by you. So this pulls the parked cars out of the lane of traffic a little bit. And then there are 2 additional spaces on the other side of Aldrich here. So I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about the survey that we deployed after the December 2nd draft was released. When we talk about decision making in public works, we want to get as many different opinions as possible. This is, of course, very difficult in an all virtual environment, and no one method of engagement is the best. Surveys are really helpful because it allows people to participate on their own time, and we can collect a lot of feedback fairly simply, but recognizing not everyone knows about the survey, not everyone chooses to participate, and it's not perfectly reflective of the neighborhood. Surveys in particular, they're not the only way we make decisions in the city. We don't do things just because the survey told us to. We combine it with, phone calls, email, conversations, feedback from the neighborhood, other people who get in touch with us, and also directives from city policy and from city leadership. And so I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the survey, but I want to make it clear that this isn't the only tool that we've used. And so I'll spend a little bit of time on that. So this December 2nd draft was created, and I just went through some of the features of that draft based on what city policy recommends that we should do in a reconstruction like this. So we created this draft and we went out and got opinion on how it would be received and if it met the needs of the neighborhood. So when we asked these questions, we asked each of these features that I just went through on the previous slide. We said, do you mostly like this feature? Are you indifferent to the feature, or do you mostly dislike it? We had 188 responses, and nearly everyone typed out an additional comment in addition to, you know, do you mostly like it, are you indifferent to it, or do you mostly dislike it? And that was a lot of great information. So I want to thank everyone who took the time to type in those comments. I read all of them. So I'll go through this format for each of those project components, and I'll spend a little bit of time on this before getting to today's draft. So we talk about the median at Bryant. 69% of survey respondents mostly liked it. 22% mostly disliked it. There's some rounding in here too. These might not add up to 100%. There were some comments suggesting that adding lights at that intersection in addition to or instead of the median would be preferred. Some concerns about adding complexity for the driving experience with eliminating the left turns on Bryant. We also had a few comments about adding plantings in the median, which is a conversation I'm looking forward to continuing when I go to the Lowry Hill East neighborhood tomorrow, actually. For the boulevard improvements and adding more green space along the corridor, 78% of respondents mostly liked it, 12% mostly disliked it. There were some comments suggesting removing the boulevard space in favor of more parking or wider bike lanes. Some people suggested specific plants or other treatments to include in this space, which I appreciated you sharing your expertise here. And some folks were concerned about sight lines for drivers, maybe not having good access to seeing bicycles or pedestrians who would be crossing because of plantings in the boulevard space. And again, you know, these comments are summaries. They aren't intended to be exhaustive. For the sidewalk improvements, 73% mostly liked the sidewalk improvements, with 15% mostly disliked it. And there were some requests for tabled crossings at Bryant and Aldrich, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, so I'm not going into a lot of detail now about the concept of a tabled crossings. Other project components. The bike lanes behind the curb at 5 feet wide, 69% of the folks who took the survey mostly liked the bike lanes behind the curb, 26% mostly disliked them. We got some comments in favor of widening the bike lanes, and we got some comments saying, well, if you didn't put in the bike lanes, then you could put in more parking, and that is what the comments would have preferred to see. For the transit amenities, 75% mostly liked the concept that was presented, with only 3% mostly disliking it. Very strong support, I think, for transit in the neighborhood, in the area on this corridor. Some folks responding to the survey were concerned about safety at the bus stops, at shelters in particular, not the signposts, and got a lot of comments about preferred amenities at the transit shelters. We are looking at most likely adding heat to the one at Hennepin, certainly, so that I think will be welcomed based on the responses that we got. So this one I want to spend a little bit of time on. This is the parking spaces, having 5 parking spaces along Franklin. So 24% of the survey respondents mostly liked the parking as it was presented. 33% were indifferent, which I was sort of surprised by, just based on the other categories where the number of people who were indifferent was pretty low. And 43% of those responding mostly disliked the parking arrangement. So I'm going to dig into this a little bit, because I saw that 43% number and I said, okay, I want to know more about that number. Of the 79 people who said they mostly disliked it, 73 people provided written comments about why. And so I went through and I looked at all the responses. Of those 73 people, 37 said that they wanted to see less or zero parking on the corridor. And that was really interesting to me. The other 36 people indicated they wanted to see more parking. You know, there were 6 people who said they disliked the parking but did not describe or did not write more. And so I'm making the assumption that you can lump, you know, you can group those 6 people who didn't type in why and say they would like to see more parking. That's an assumption on my part. So another way to look at these responses is 57% of the people who took the survey are generally okay with the 5 parking spaces that were in the layout in December. 23% of survey respondents wanted more parking, and 20% of survey respondents wanted less parking. So that's me grouping and splitting things a little bit differently based on the typed responses that people put into the survey. Other typed responses that people put into the survey indicated some concerns about personal safety walking to and from the cars, especially at night. And, you know, when we talked about this last December, we said we don't know what kind of parking spaces those 5 parking spaces would be. Some people were split, some people were interested in metered parking, and some people were only interested in resident parking for people who live in the buildings nearby. So those were split. So as I said earlier, while we don't use survey data, only survey data, you know, we take a lot into consideration beyond just survey data to make our decisions. The results of this survey and other engagement indicate that the December 2nd draft was generally on track with neighborhood expectations. I had some great conversations, email and over the phone, with property owners and residents in the neighborhood. And I really appreciate everyone that called and had a good conversation. You know, I do understand that there was some frustration, say, well, why am I participating if you're not changing the draft to meet my needs? And I think it's because, you know, we don't take one perspective into consideration. We look at all these different inputs, and between city policies about increasing safety and reducing reliance on private car ownership and the general sentiment of the neighborhood and the residents around, that told us that this draft that we just walked through was pretty much on track. I also want to say, for engagement purposes, you know, talking to some of these property owners, they have all had some outreach to talk about right-of-way and construction impacts, recognizing that a year's construction season, April to November, can have some significant impact on operations and where people live and how they go about their daily lives. So that being said, looking backward, now we'll look forward. New since December 2nd. We are going to be adding an evaluation of raised crossings at Aldrich and Bryant. I mentioned that survey respondents were looking for us to include what some people call them tabled crossings. That's now in our vernacular here in Public Works to call them raised crossings. It is, however, too early in the design process to know now if raised crossings at Aldrich and Bryant are a good fit for this project. The steepness of the hill down to Lindale can make raised crossings too difficult to incorporate. This difficulty is tied to grade changes, substantial impacts to Bryant and Aldrich. You know, if we have to dig up Bryant and Aldrich a couple hundred feet deep, that might be prohibitive in order to make this a reality. And also cost is a reality when to be fiscally responsible with taxpayer dollars. We will know in early 2022 if these, well, I just said tabled crossings, if raised crossings can be incorporated in this project. So it's too soon to tell right now, and something that we'll make the decision on later on. Also news since December 2nd. I know that we have talked in previous open houses and received questions about the future of the intersections at Hennepin and Lindale. Of course, the Hennepin Avenue Reconstruction project is coming in future years. And so the corners of Hennepin and Franklin will be rebuilt with the Hennepin Avenue project, not the Franklin Avenue project. However, our intent at Lindale was to not touch the corners either as part of this Franklin project. But that proved to be a little difficult, and we decided that the new bicycle and pedestrian space that is part of this draft needs to better tie in to what we have at Lindale today, and that would best be accomplished through a rebuild of those corners. So we're just talking about rebuilding the western 2 corners, the northwestern and the southwestern corner of Lindale, where previously we had said we would not be making improvements. We're anticipating minimal impacts to the signals at Lyndale, which is usually what makes this kind of work too cost prohibitive. But we're cautiously optimistic that we can make the changes to improve the bicycle and pedestrian experience at Lyndale without it being astronomically expensive. So that being said, this is the new graphic for March 9th, as opposed to the December 2nd graphic that we were talking about earlier. Many of the same features, nearly all of them, I think, are retained here. They should be all retained. We have added these light yellow colors at Aldrich and Bryant on the north and south sides that indicate the potential for a raised crossing, which will be, as I just mentioned, evaluated over the next several months for the potential to be included in the final design. But at this point, we won't be, we can't say for sure that they will be included. But we will say that we're going to do the work to see if we can make it happen. And then we've also added over at Lyndale some notes there, note B, just indicating that those corners will be, reconstructed. They're going to look different than they do today in order to better tie in to the rest of that project. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll go back to the layout, to the drawing, after I go through a couple of slides about logistics here. We do have a Q&A box for you to submit questions based on the content that I just presented. I do also think we have someone just call in, and I might defer to Kelsey and Matthew on the logistics of if someone who has called in over the phone wants to ask a question, because I admit that I've been too busy talking to track that myself. So myself and Adam are available for questions right now. Kelsey and Matthew are handling the back of house work to make this a reality. So thanks again to them for joining us today. This presentation is being recorded. And I'm actually really, this is one of the benefits to working in a pandemic, working virtually like this, as I heard of at least one viewing party of the last open house that people had outside in a responsible way to share information about this project. And so I'm really glad that this session is being recorded and will be made available on our project website. Actually, we can get this turned around pretty quickly, hopefully by the end of the week, so that if you know someone who wanted to be here today but couldn't for whatever reason, they can log back in and watch this presentation later this week. Project website, that URL is out of date right now, but the email and cell phone number for myself are not out of date. So please give me a call at any time if you'd like to talk about this project or have questions that don't get answered today. With that, I'll leave this slide up and turn it over to Kelsey and Matthew to see if there are questions for us to answer.
Yeah, hi, Katie. We have one question so far in the chat. I will read it here for the group. I believe, Katie, this is one for you. The question is, how will the protected bike lanes be tied into potential bike lanes on Franklin Avenue west of the project and any bike infrastructure east of the project?
Sure, happy to take that question. So there's two parts. There's Franklin Avenue to the west of Hennepin, and there's Franklin Avenue to the east of Hennepin. Franklin Avenue to the east of Lyndale. Franklin Avenue to the east of Lyndale is a county street. The county has not yet indicated what their future plans are for that stretch of Franklin. The county will be rebuilding Franklin Avenue from Blaisdell to Chicago in, I think it's 2025. I could have that year wrong though. It's a few years away yet. It's not coming up quickly. And I think this is a really interesting opportunity to think about what will happen just to the east of Lyndale, because we will have our newly rebuilt segment, and then the county will have their rebuilt segment further to the east, which will then leave this part just on the other side of Lyndale, remaining. And so I think that what we're doing here on this segment has the potential to influence, connectivity in an east-west direction over to that side of Lyndale. I'm not sure yet. I haven't heard of anything on the radar yet from the county. I did check in with them a few weeks ago, but there was nothing new to report. And so I can't speak to their priorities yet or when they might make changes to the Franklin on that side of Lindale. Franklin on the west side of Hennepin is slated for a repavement this coming year, 2021. So it's a repavement, not a reconstruction, just redoing the asphalt surface, 2 or 3 inches on the top instead of tearing up the asphalt and the concrete. And I believe engagement on that project is going to start in earnest in April. I believe there might be a visit to the neighborhood in April if their agenda allows it. And so I think that that is the best opportunity to provide feedback to leadership about what the vision is for Franklin on that side of Hennepin. So it's not included in the scope of this project, but it is much more immediate. It's more immediate than this project that we're talking about today, and more immediate than what the county might see for Franklin on their side of Lindale.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. I have another one that's probably a good fit for you, but Adam, if it's better to address it through a construction or engineering standpoint, please jump in. It is, in terms of the driveways and alleys, the graphic shows that there are breaks in the sidewalks and bikeways. Is this the plan, or will they be raised and continuous past these car spaces, creating a safer walking and biking experience?
Thanks, Kelsey. Yes, my understanding is that the treatment for the bicycle and pedestrian space will carry across the driveway spaces. So the sidewalk space is a traditional concrete, gray material. The bicycle facility is what we call now a black ice treatment, a darker gray concrete. And it is my understanding that those treatments will carry across the driveway space. But I understand that in some cases, as we get closer to detailed engineering and construction, we might encounter obstacles to that. And so I'm wondering if Adam has an idea of what he might expect to see as we get towards detailed construction and engineering.
No, yes, you're right, Katie. Completely right. The bike facility and sidewalk will carry through at the same elevation, same level. There won't be a kind of a dip down or dip up or incline on the driveways. We'll design the driveways where it's pretty flat and the same elevation as the bike and sidewalk facility across the driveways. If that makes sense. So it'll be a nice smooth ride across the driveways for the bicycles and pets walking.
Terrific, thanks. Kelsey, do we have any other questions in the queue?
One more just came in. It is, can we have a median on Aldrich and Franklin, like the one being put on Bryant and Franklin? The intersection still feels too wide.
Thanks. I appreciate that question. There's a couple of reasons why there's a median proposed for Bryant and not for Aldrich. There are a few things that are happening at Bryant that don't happen many other places. The first is that Bryant Avenue itself is designated as a bicycle boulevard. And so this says that the city is looking to prioritize bicycle movements on those streets. And so since we are looking to put more bicycles through on Bryant than are on Aldrich, that's one of the reasons why we're looking to make this median more prominent there. The other reason is because we have seen a demonstrated noticeable number of crashes at Bryant, and these crashes have been related to charging movements and related to bicycles. And so as part of our Vision Zero goal, which is to, for those who aren't aware, the city has a goal that by 2027 we will have 0 fatalities or serious injuries on our streets, which is pretty ambitious. And 2027 is really coming up now. And so we're looking at making improvements where there's a demonstrated need. And so that condition does not exist at Aldrich. And so that's why there's not a similar treatment proposed for Aldrich, but we do believe that we can make a measurable impact on crashes and improving safety if we do put that treatment at Bryant.
Awesome, thanks, Katie. Another one about bike connections, this one to bike connections on the Hennepin Avenue project. The question is specifically, how will this bike lane connect to the newly released Hennepin Avenue plan, or at least the option 1 that shows a full bike lane?
Yes, I think that there's a lot going on with the Hennepin project right now, as the person asking this question is clearly well aware. You know, there is no set design yet for Hennepin, although we're looking at 2 options. At least, you know, 2 options were talked about in the public open houses last week. And I think that if that first option of Hennepin is proposed, I think there's going to be an important need for a treatment at the corners there. So I mentioned that the corners of Hennepin Avenue won't be rebuilt with the Franklin project. They will be rebuilt with the Hennepin project. And I think that that is probably where the most attention would be paid. Adam, fortunately, is the project engineer for the Hennepin project as well. So I wonder if he has anything to add about the bicycle connections between the Hennepin Avenue project and Franklin and the Bryant Avenue Bicycle Boulevard.
Good question. No, you did a good job of kind of explaining the situation for both projects. As you mentioned, Hennepin, we had our last week at our second open house. We do have a 1 option showing a bike facility on the east side of Hennepin. So if that eventually becomes the preferred concept, that bike facility would connect to the Franklin intersection, right? In terms of Hennepin will be a north-south bike facility, and obviously Franklin will be a west-east bike facility. So we'll have to look at the final design at that specific corner to make sure how that bike facility will connect for both projects. But I just want to clarify, there's nothing been approved or for Hennepin at this point. We're still in the kind of engagement planning stage of the project.
Thanks, Adam. That was helpful for me too.
Excellent. Katie, I'm wondering if you can address where there will be painted crosswalks on the corridor.
Yes, eagle-eyed viewer for sure. So as part of the Hennepin Avenue project, we are not showing a painted crosswalk on this Franklin project because we anticipate a painted crosswalk to be incorporated as part of the Hennepin Avenue project. So we did do a painted crosswalk here over on the Lyndale Avenue side because we will be now rebuilding the Lyndale Avenue corners on the west side. And so we did put a zebra stripe crosswalk over there to the east on Lyndale. And right now, the traffic controls at Bryant and Aldrich do not show the painted crosswalks there. I think that that's something that is going to be looked at further. I think that there's other people in our traffic control unit who talk about when and where we put in crosswalk striping. And I think that, you know, it's a fairly inexpensive treatment. It's not something we have to plan a long time in advance for. So it's something that could be included based on feedback in future iterations. But the eagle-eyed viewer noticed that they're not on Aldrich and Bryant today. And that is representative of the feedback that we've got internal to Public Works right now, but could be changed in the future.
Great, thank you, Katie. I'm wondering if Adam can potentially speak to this one. It's a question about the width of the cut-throughs on the median at Bryant. It's, will the median at Bryant be wide enough for adult trikes, cargo bikes, and other wider bikes to get through?
Thank you for the question, Kelsey. Yes, the openings will be 6 feet wide, so that should be plenty of space for different type of bikes to get through the median. I don't know if Katie wants to add anything to that.
Yeah, 6 feet is the dimension that I was told as well. And what's interesting is the reason for that 6 feet is because of the city's commitment to winter maintenance. You know, the Loring Greenway to the north, just off the screen, is maintained for winter by the city, and we take like a Bobcat little machine across the Loring Greenway to plow that. And I believe the intent is for whoever's assigned to plow the Loring Greenway to then come down and plow out these channels as well. And so it's a nice wide 6 feet in order to accommodate winter maintenance. So it's definitely a win for the bicycle users and for using different types of bicycles. And it's also a win for bicycle users who rely on the city to do good winter maintenance.
Perfect. Thank you for that. This is a question about Aldrich and the bump outs on the quadrants. Why isn't the bump out on the northwest quadrant of Aldrich not mirrored on the northeast quadrant?
Sure. It does look like a bump out in the northwest quadrant there, due in large part because of the parking bay. I think that it would more closely mirror the northeast quadrant if the parking wasn't there. So I think that the feature is enhanced by the parking availability. I haven't measured the distances though, and so that's probably something that if you want to call me up afterwards, we can dig into that with more specificity to help answer your question. But the design of that northwest quadrant is related more to the parking than to the pedestrian use.
Thanks for that, Katie. As of now, there's no other questions in the chat, but maybe we'll give it a few minutes and see if people have others.
Okay, that sounds great. Again, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to attend today. I'm looking forward to future open houses where we can have these conversations in person, but I hope that you can provide information about this project to anyone who's curious and pass along my phone number and contact information so that we can continue to have these conversations. Otherwise, if you don't have a specific question, but you want to hear more about this project, I will be going to the Lowry Hill East Neighborhood Association. I think it's their zoning and planning committee tomorrow night. And so I'll be giving a modified version of this presentation and taking questions from that group as well. Kelsey, is there anything else coming in?
Nope, there are no new questions in the question and answer.
All right, well, I'd say that's probably it for the evening, unless someone would like to interrupt and correct me. So thank you again for coming tonight. I really appreciate all the feedback. I hope that,
One last question.
Yes, excellent.
We've got a few minutes left on the clock here. This is a specific, this may have been answered already, but maybe we can just touch on it quickly again. Will consideration be made to make the bike path material continuous across driveways to reinforce the priority of through movements and make riding a bike more comfortable with no bumps?
Yes, I believe the answer to that question is yes. And actually something I want to highlight from a very small change from December until March is that some portions of the corridor had a bicycle lane that sort of zigzagged a little bit. It sort of bent in and then it bent back out again to for some space reasons. But Adam and his team have been able to iron that out, smooth that crease, and now the bike lane is, flat all the way across this treatment. It doesn't zigzag all that much from left to right. And so I think we've really created a pretty terrific riding surface that should be easily used by the folks in the neighborhood.
All right, well, I think that may be all the questions that we're going to get tonight. So Katie, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks so much, Kelsey. Thanks to Kelsey and Matthew for helping operationalize this open house. Thanks to Adam for all your hard work on this project and taking it through final design into 2022 construction. And thanks to everyone who has participated through the survey and attending here tonight, and who has asked good questions and helped make this a better project. Thanks so much again. Have a good night. I'll talk to you soon.